Tonight, urgent news is unfolding from southern Ukraine. Zaporizhia is in absolute chaos, and the world is watching closely as events spiral out of control. Russian forces have been struck by a sudden and devastating communications blackout, leaving their entire command structure paralyzed and unable to respond effectively to the rapidly changing situation on the ground. Reports from the front lines indicate that Russian units are now completely isolated, unable to coordinate with each other and gripped by a growing sense of confusion and fear as they try to make sense of the chaos around them. This isn't just a minor technical glitch, it's a catastrophic collapse of their entire communications network, leaving officers and soldiers alike scrambling for answers in the dark. Ukrainian forces triggered this crisis with a precise targeted operation. This wasn't a frontal assault, but a smart, high-tech disruption using advanced electronic warfare tactics to jam and disable Russian systems. Now, Russian commanders can't reach their troops, artillery has gone silent, and soldiers are left in the dark, cut off from orders and support. For these isolated units, the silence is more terrifying than the chaos of battle itself. With no information and no guidance, anxiety and fear are spreading rapidly through the ranks. Ukrainian teams have exploited these weaknesses, moving swiftly and decisively to sow panic and disarray among Russian forces, taking advantage of every gap in their defenses. The result is clear: Russian drone and artillery activity has ground to a halt, leaving their forces unable to strike back or defend themselves effectively. Without real-time communication, Russian weapons are essentially blind, unable to receive targeting data or coordinate their actions, rendering them useless in the face of advancing Ukrainian troops. For the first time in months, the skies above Zaporizhia are eerily quiet. No Russian drones buzzing overhead, no thunder of bombardment, just an uneasy calm settling over the battlefield. Ukrainian forces are seizing this rare window of opportunity, pushing forward through breaches in enemy lines and reclaiming ground that was once thought lost. Tonight, the battlefield has been dramatically reshaped by command chaos and technological failure, marking a turning point in the conflict and sending shockwaves through military circles worldwide. The Ukrainian operation began as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the battlefield in deep orange and purple hues. This wasn't a massive, thunderous offensive that would shake the ground for miles around. Instead, it was a rapid surgical strike, carefully planned and executed with precision, designed to catch the enemy off guard and exploit the cover of darkness. Small, highly mobile units advanced with remarkable speed, their movements coordinated and deliberate. Their goal was not to seize and hold territory, but to disrupt Russian positions, sow confusion, and destabilize the enemy's sense of security. Under the cover of night, these Ukrainian teams slipped through gaps in Russian lines, moving silently and efficiently. Russian soldiers, expecting a quiet evening, were caught completely off guard as the first signs of the assault appeared. Rather than engaging in costly, drawn-out firefights, the Ukrainians bypassed heavily fortified positions. They targeted weak spots, striking where the enemy least expected and avoiding unnecessary losses. The Russian defenders were left disoriented and confused, unable to mount a coordinated defense. Their lines of communication were disrupted, and their sense of control quickly evaporated. By the time Russian commanders began to grasp the situation, Ukrainian soldiers were already operating deep behind enemy lines, moving with purpose and confidence through territory the Russians thought was secure. The element of surprise was devastating. The battlefield became a maze of uncertainty, with both sides struggling to distinguish friend from foe in the darkness and chaos. Russian troops braced for a loud, overwhelming assault, but instead, they were met with eerie silence punctuated by sudden, precise attacks. The unpredictability of the strikes left them paralyzed and unsure of where to focus their defense. Panic spread rapidly. Soldiers fired at shadows, unsure if they were shooting at the enemy or empty air. The confusion was total. Firefights erupted in the darkness, with many not even knowing who was fighting whom. The Ukrainians turned Russian defenses into deadly traps. Isolated units found themselves surrounded, cut off from reinforcements, and unable to retreat or regroup. This was modern agile warfare at its finest, using speed, stealth, and confusion as weapons. The Ukrainians exploited every moment of uncertainty, turning chaos into a tactical advantage. Overwhelming force wasn't necessary. By targeting command posts and communication hubs, the Ukrainians dismantled the Russian response before it could even begin, leaving commanders in the dark and units leaderless. Their deep knowledge of the terrain and careful study of enemy weaknesses gave the Ukrainians a decisive edge. They moved with confidence, using the landscape for cover and striking at precisely the right moments. The result was a fast-moving, chaotic situation where Ukraine seized and held the initiative. Russian forces were left scrambling, unable to predict where the next blow would fall. Russian commanders struggled to even understand what was happening, let alone coordinate a response. Maps became useless as the front lines shifted rapidly and communication broke down. In the end, the operation was a masterclass in disruption, a demonstration of how speed, surprise, and intelligence can overcome even the most entrenched defenses. The Ukrainians had not just attacked, they had outthought and outmaneuvered their enemy at every turn. In the dead of night, a sudden and catastrophic technological collapse crippled Russian forces across the front. Their command centers, once buzzing with activity, fell eerily silent as screens flickered and died. The hum of computers and the chatter of encrypted radios vanished, replaced by a chilling quiet. For months, Russian units had been relying, often unofficially, on advanced systems like Starlink to coordinate their drones, relay orders, and keep units connected across vast distances. This satellite network had become the backbone of their battlefield communications, linking commanders to troops and machines in real time. But then, without warning, access was cut, screens went dark, radios fell silent, encrypted channels that once carried vital information were suddenly dead. The digital lifeline was severed in an instant. This digital blackout triggered a cascade of failures up and down the command chain. Panic spread as officers scrambled to restore contact, but every attempt failed. Orders couldn't be sent, and updates from the field vanished. Russian commanders were suddenly blind, unable to track Ukrainian movements, direct artillery, or even confirm the status of their own units. The fog of war thickened, leaving leaders frustrated and powerless. Drones that once patrolled the skies were grounded. Surveillance feeds went black. With no eyes in the sky, situational awareness evaporated, leaving the battlefield shrouded in uncertainty. A modern army without information is just isolated groups of soldiers, each waiting for orders that never arrive. Coordination broke down, and units became vulnerable and exposed. Commanders couldn't tell if this was a minor raid or the start of a full-scale offensive. The uncertainty paralyzed decision-making as no one dared to act without clear intelligence. Artillery crews stood by their silent guns, waiting for coordinates that never came. The thunder of artillery, once a constant on the battlefield, faded into silence. Infantrymen felt abandoned, exposed, and without support. Cut off from their commanders, they huddled behind cover, unsure of what to do next. The blackout exposed a critical vulnerability, an over-reliance on a single, unsanctioned system for command and control. Ukrainian forces recognized this weakness and exploited it with precision and speed. This blackout wasn't just a technical failure, it was a strategic victory for Ukraine. By disrupting Russian communications, they seized the initiative and sowed chaos behind enemy lines. In modern warfare, the battle for information is as crucial as the fight on the ground. Control the flow of data, and you control the tempo of war itself. By winning the information war, even for a brief moment, Ukraine unbalanced its opponent and shifted the momentum of the conflict. The Russians were left in the dark, literally and figuratively, struggling to recover as Ukraine pressed its advantage. With Russian communications down, Ukrainian units launched the next phase, clearing out infiltrators. Russian recon teams hiding in the gray zone were now cut off and vulnerable. Ukrainian soldiers, equipped with night vision and detailed maps, hunted them down methodically. The process was swift, moving through ruined villages and forests, eliminating isolated enemy pockets. This secured Ukrainian rear areas and removed a persistent threat. Simultaneously, targeted strikes hit Russian fuel depots, ammo dumps, and stranded supply trucks. These strikes crippled Russian logistics, ensuring shortages even if communications were restored. The chaos was prolonged, maximizing Ukrainian advantage. As dawn broke, Ukrainian flags rose over settlements contested for months. This was more than a military win, it was a powerful message. The sight of the Ukrainian flag boosted morale and signaled a turning tide. For Russian troops, it was a devastating psychological blow. The Russian response was not defense, but panic. With no orders, junior officers and soldiers were left to improvise. Some hunkered down, others tried to retreat, running into Ukrainian units or minefields. Desperate calls for help went unanswered as communications failed. Abandonment shattered morale and unit cohesion. Soldiers acted on rumors, sometimes firing on their own in confusion. The rigid top-down Russian command structure became their undoing. When orders stopped, the system froze. Unlike Ukraine's flexible approach, Russian rigidity led to paralysis. Panic spread to the rear, convoys stalled, command posts abandoned. The entire Russian apparatus in Zaporizhia seemed to freeze. What began as a technical problem became a full-blown crisis of command. Fear and confusion ruled the battlefield. Into the information void, misinformation exploded. Russian military bloggers and social media spread wild, unverified claims, massive Ukrainian offensives, NATO involvement. These rumors, born of panic, fueled chaos. Commanders in nearby sectors overreacted, moving reserves and abandoning positions to counter phantom threats. This created new gaps for Ukrainians to exploit. The misinformation disrupted Russian plans more than any Ukrainian attack. Panic was contagious. A rumor about a breakthrough could cause a unit to retreat, even if the threat was imaginary. The Russians were defeated by their own imagination and lack of information. In contrast, Ukrainians maintained strict operational silence, letting Russian panic do the work. The Ukrainian strategy was as much about what they didn't say as what they did. Silence and Russian misinformation created a perfect storm of confusion. The fog of war became Ukraine's ally. Zaporizhia reveals a stark contrast between two armies. The Ukrainian military showed clarity, precision, and adaptability. Every unit knew its role. Junior commanders made decisions on the fly. Flexibility and shared mission understanding kept momentum high. This Western-style doctrine, initiative, and decentralized command made Ukrainians resilient and effective. Russian forces, by contrast, were brittle and paralyzed when command broke down. Soldiers waited for orders that never came, unable to adapt. The safest option became inaction. Ukraine's agility and learning from years of conflict paid off. Modern warfare is about speed, information, and adaptability, not brute force. The Russian military's old centralized thinking was exposed. In Zaporizhia, the modern approach won decisively. Russian forces ended up disrupting themselves. Panic and misinformation led to a series of unforced errors. Commanders moved troops and artillery in response to phantom threats. These knee-jerk reactions weakened defenses elsewhere and wasted resources. Traffic jams and logistical chaos followed. Ukrainians created a small problem. Russian panic turned it into a crisis. Sometimes, you don't need to destroy an army, just disrupt its thinking. The Ukrainian operation was a small stone that jammed the Russian machine. The machine began to tear itself apart. Russian errors compounded, leading to total dysfunction. A limited targeted action had an outsized effect. The chaos was more psychological than physical. As dawn breaks, key lessons emerge. The Ukrainian military's adaptability and learning are its greatest assets. They exploited Russia's centralized, fragile communications with a simple, brilliant plan. The Russian military repeated old mistakes: rigid command, vulnerability to panic and misinformation. Simple, well-executed steps, blackout, rapid movement, targeting isolated units, caused massive disruption. Understanding the enemy proved more powerful than brute force. This was a victory of strategy over firepower. The events in Zaporizhia will be studied for years. The fight for information is now central to war. Armies that control information and empower soldiers have the edge. In this battle of ideas, the modern adaptable approach prevailed.